What if one of the most powerful figures in Gnostic mysticism did not originate with the Gnostics at all, but is in fact the oldest continuous expression of the divine feminine in the entire Western spiritual tradition, older than Christianity, older than the Greek mystery schools, perhaps even older than recorded philosophy itself, a presence whose roots stretch back into the earliest layers of myth and scripture. Her name is Sophia, and her story begins long before the Nag Hammadi texts, long before the Gnostic Gospels, in the ancient Hebrew scriptures, in the temples of Egypt, and in the philosophical schools of Babylon and Greece, where different cultures articulated fragments of a single cosmic intuition that would eventually converge into one mythic figure. In the Hebrew Bible, in the Book of Proverbs chapter 8, we encounter Chokmah, the personified wisdom of God, who speaks in the first person and describes herself as present before creation, brought forth at the beginning, standing beside God as a master craftsman when the heavens were set in place, not as an abstract quality, but as a living, active, feminine presence participating in the formation of the cosmos. A portrayal so vivid that later interpreters struggled to reduce her to mere metaphor, because she appears less like poetic symbolism and more like a co-creative divine intelligence embedded within a strictly monotheistic framework. At roughly the same historical horizon, across the Mediterranean world, the cult of Isis was spreading from Egypt outward into the Hellenistic sphere, where she was no longer seen as simply a local goddess, but as the universal mother. The cosmic wisdom underlying all existence, described in her own temple inscriptions as the natural mother of all things and the governing force of the elements, a self-revelation that echoes the voice of Chokmah so closely that in cities like Alexandria, where Jewish and Egyptian thought met and mingled, many would have perceived them not as separate deities, but as different names for the same primordial feminine reality. Then, in Plato's Timaeus, we find the philosophical articulation of a similar structure, in the form of the world soul, the mediating principle between the eternal divine realm and the material cosmos, an animating intelligence that gives order, life, and coherence to the universe, neither identical with the highest God nor reducible to matter, but suspended between transcendence and embodiment, a concept that profoundly shaped Gnostic metaphysics and provided the intellectual framework through which Sophia could later be understood as the intermediary, who bridges spirit and matter and, in the Gnostic retelling, tragically falls into the very material realm she was meant to harmonize. Even deeper in time, in the Sumerian myth of Inanna, we encounter the archetypal pattern of the divine feminine descending into the underworld, passing through 7 gates and surrendering aspects of herself until she stands stripped and powerless before death, only to rise again transformed, a narrative structure that mirrors with uncanny precision the later Gnostic account of Sophia's fall from the pleroma into exile, her suffering within the confines of matter, and her eventual restoration, suggesting that what the Gnostics expressed in theological language was the re-emergence of a mythic pattern already thousands of years old. So when the Gnostic schools of the 1st and 2nd centuries developed their elaborate Sophia mythology, they were not inventing a new goddess, but synthesizing millennia of accumulated symbolism into a single figure of extraordinary depth, a being who is simultaneously Chokmah, the co-creator, Isis, the universal mother, Plato's mediating world soul, and Inanna, the descending and rising goddess, and in texts like the Gospel of Truth, the Apocryphon of John, and Pistis Sophia, she becomes the dramatic heart of a cosmic story in which knowledge, longing, fall, and redemption are inseparably intertwined. What makes Sophia so enduring, and perhaps so resonant even today, is precisely this layered origin, because she is not confined to one tradition or moment in history, but represents the distilled essence of the ancient world's attempt to articulate the mystery of divine wisdom in feminine form, a presence that seems to reappear wherever cultures grapple with the relationship between transcendence and creation, light and matter, loss and return, as if the story of Sophia is less about a single mythological character and more about a recurring intuition woven into the spiritual memory of the West, a memory that, whether consciously or not, has always known her. So much for Sophia, but do you also know what makes Gnosis in general so interesting, especially in modern times and also for twin flames? It is not only the idea of recognizing the divine spark, of redemption and unity through knowledge and insight without mediating institutions standing between the human being and the divine. Nor is it simply because the discovery of Nag Hammadi was not that long ago, and Gnosis is still not mainstream esotericism. It is also the dark side, and how the ancient texts take on an entirely new meaning. If you want to learn more, then subscribe to my channel and dive deeper into the mysteries of the soul's journey.